Okay, hi guys. The air got a slight chill in it this morning, and I've now attended Spirit Halloween twice and bought $200 worth of stuff. This costume being one of them. I'm dressed like this today, obviously, because we're going to be talking about Kierkegaard. We surely are. Like I said in my last video, I'm not going to waste my breath talking about anything else but things I like and enjoy. And one of the things I very much enjoy is this raggedy ass, beat up, annotated ass copy of Either Or that I got from a Half Price Books that I put my heart and fucking soul into, okay? If you have never read Kierkegaard, go do it. Like, if you're interested in existentialism at all, go do it. I can't recommend this man more. He is hilarious. He is hilarious. He is, as if, to put it in very layman terms, a girl's girl who also, like, was heavily on 4chan back in the day, had access to the kind of genius he had. You know what I mean? Because he is so smart, but he's also like, I'm like, buddy, like, what? And he's one of those writers where it's a very frustrating and ironic read. He is, oh god, he's so good. I'm having a hard time talking. No, I love Kierkegaard. I can't recommend this book more. It's just like, it has enough references to media and books and stories for a lifetime to keep you busy. I think that it's definitely one I want to reread again. It's just such a taxing read. It's so difficult to understand sometimes. I swear to God, like, I'll be reading it and maybe I'm just fucking dumb, but I have a lot of passages we're gonna go over or whatever. But I just be like, what the fuck is he trying to say? Take me like 10 different times trying to read it, and then I'm like looking up a YouTube video and somebody's annotation of this book because I don't fucking know. But yeah, we're gonna go over it today. If you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about and you think I sound psychotic, go read the book. You'll probably feel the same way after. But Søren Kierkegaard was like a super religious man, hence the outfit I'm in right now. I'm a nun, obviously. Don't ban me, YouTube. But yeah, he was a very religious man, hence the existentialism. And so I think Either Or is a really good jumping off point, starting point, to kind of get an understanding of like who he was and who he perceives society and the world to be. Simply put, it's either the aesthetic, morals, desires, drives, aesthetic personality, persona per se, life, and then or is the ethical, the moral, the religious, the righteous, I don't know if righteous is the right word, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, so Either Or. And this is it's a very genius book. It's a volume 1 and volume 2. You gotta get them combined. You gotta get these ones combined. Because it's just such a smooth transition. It's like written as if it's a series of letters, arguing either side, right? The aesthetic from this lowly spinster, bachelor, seducer who literally just wants to take young girls, you know what I'm saying, and then leaves them, and it's crazy, and you're just like sitting there being like, wow, I hate this guy, but also he kind of eats down sometimes with his references, right? And Kierkegaard is so good at imagery. Like, it's giving Game of Thrones. Like, when you're reading Game of Thrones, like, you can so perfectly and vividly imagine that world because of the description, in my opinion, which I'm a big fan of a run-on sentence. I surely am. I love a run-on sentence. So it kind of makes sense that this would be my favorite style of book. Everybody was annoyed as hell when I was reading this, though, because I wouldn't shut up about it. And I would send people like super long Snapchats being like, listen to this passage, like this passage. But yeah, this book changed my life. I don't know. Like, this book came into my life. Sometimes I feel like God just picks the books for me. Like, I literally went to Half Price Books and I was just browsing the philosophy section, which is tiny, mind you. It's like tiny, so it's always like, you know, hit or miss, because it's usually the same 20 books. And this one caught my eye because I was like always trying to read more Kierkegaard, and I really hadn't knocked anything big off my list of his. I was like, oh, never heard of this, pick it up, and I'm like, holy shit, I can't put it down. Oh my god, this is my Bible. Like, it was giving the first time I ever read Thus Spoke Zarathustra. That is the kind of like, oh, moment it had for me. And I was like, then after that, I got into Leo Tolstoy, The Life and Death of Jesus Christ, I think. That was the one. So now, then I got on my whole, like, religious Catholicism, arc of, like, wanting to know all about that, like, Bible lore. It was so crazy anyways. Like, Kierkegaard really leads you down a rabbit hole. Yeah. Also, in my copy, so, like, anytime there's, like, I'll show you what I mean, because there's a, like, I don't know what you call it, like a marker, I promise I'm smart, to like tell you to go to the back for the reference or whatever, especially when they're referencing like music and stuff, you know what I mean, they number it. It's very fucking confusing. And there's water damage. I took this book with me everywhere, y'all, everywhere. But some of them, it's just like, I don't know. This book made me want to research. This book made me want to go to fucking college and like get a English major. Like, this book made me want to like write a book. Like, honestly, I should have reread the preface before I started this video. But yeah, like I said, so starting off, we start with the aesthetic, right? And basically, so he starts off making these references to Mozart, right? He's comparing how do I word it? Because it's like explaining to someone, which is ironic in itself, like explaining with words the feeling that Mozart's music gives you. Like, you can't describe the feeling with words because it's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's maybe more than that, because like to him, he's putting him on this pedestal of like genius, which like true, but like, you know what I mean? So yeah, he kind of like starts off like that. Hang on, I'm trying to find like I didn't take any notes, didn't prep for this, literally. Okay. Ooh, right off the bat. Okay. This is in Ancient Tragedies, Reflection in the Modern. Yeah, so they were talking about literally ancient Greek tragedies, and then like plays, like significant plays. Yeah. To be isolated is always to assert oneself Isolated is always to assert oneself numerically. When you assert yourself as one, that is isolation. Ooh, fuck. Followed by, because what are we talking about here? Okay, I don't know what the fuck that's about. Sometimes I just be highlighting shit. Okay. Followed by, as isolated individuals always become comic by asserting their own accidental individuality into the face of evolutionary necessity. Let's break that down. Okay, let me go back and read it so it's like a smoother. Okay. To be isolated is always to assert oneself numerically. When you assert yourself as one, that is isolation. So basically, take it with a grain of salt. Like, I'm breaking it down to like the dumbest bitches level, which is mine. But like, when you go against something like religion, spirituality, Christianity, because he was very Christian, like an organized religion, right? Or just like the concept of religion in general. When you as an individual choose the aesthetic way of living, essentially he's equating it to being completely off the beaten path, completely against the grain. Like, I'm so, like, woe is me, and OMFG, like, it's so lonely, and, like, it's sad over here, but then it's followed literally by all isolated individuals always become comic by asserting their own accidental individuality in the face of evolutionary necessity. There is no doubt that it would be most Zena's here. There is no doubt that it would be most deeply comical to have some accidental individual come by the universal idea of wanting to be the savior of the whole world. On the other hand, the appearance of Christ is in a certain sense the deepest tragedy, in parentheses. In another sense, it is infinitely more, in parentheses, because Christ came in the fullest time, and a point I must particularly stress in connection with what follows, he bore the sins of all the world. Right. And then he goes to talk about Aristotle, thought and character, and that kind of stuff. So then he moves into that, right? Hence, modern tragedy has no epic foreground, no epic heritage. The hero stands and falls entirely on his own deeds. So, another example of an aesthetic perception of the archetypes in the world, essentially archetype society, the hero archetype. I've talked about this before. I'm not gonna fucking beat a dead horse. But yeah, so like, we live by our own actions. We live by the consequences of our own actions. But if there is no God or religion dictating that we allow to be in our conception of our reality, then we truly are the creators of our own consequence, if that makes sense. So we choose whether to accept that consequence or not if you're living aesthetically, right? I'm not going to read you this. Oh, actually, I might. Okay. It's just me reading this book for 2 hours. I love that. If the individual is entirely without guilt, the tragic interest is removed, for the tragic collision loses its power. If, on the other hand, he is guilty absolutely, he can no longer interest us tragically. So it is surely a misunderstanding of the tragic that our age strives to have the whole tragic destiny become transubstained into individuality and subjectivity. One turns a deaf ear on the hero's past life. One throws his whole life upon his shoulders as his own doing, makes him accountable for everything. But in so doing, one also transforms his aesthetic guilt into an ethical guilt. The tragic hero thus becomes bad. Evil becomes the real objective of tragedy, but evil has no aesthetic interest, and sin is not an aesthetic element. That is super important, and we'll be touching on that later, but that sin is not an aesthetic element. Again, like, it's going back to the concept of we are the creators of our own consequence and reality if we choose to believe in the lack thereof, a higher power, or God, whatever, kind of summing that up. There is a sadness and healing power in the tragic which truly one should not despise, and when one wants in the larger than life manner of our age to gain oneself, one loses oneself and becomes comical. There is a part in this book that I really want to talk about, and we're not there yet, but it's one of the best, and I just watched an essay about this today, and he brought it up too, and I was like, yes, like, okay, it's one of the best uses of imagery I have ever read in a book, like, and it was so gut-wrenching. Essentially, he's painting this picture, right, of these people that are at an opera, like a play, whatever, and a clown comes out and is shouting and yelling at them like the building is on fire. You guys all gotta get out, or we're all gonna die. You guys gotta get out, or we're all gonna die. And there really is a fire, right? And the building is burning down, and everybody else is evacuated besides this clown who's up on stage trying to get everyone off. And the more he is urgent about it and urging them to leave, the harder they laugh, and the more distracted they become. right? And so not only does the clown perish, but the people he was trying to save who laughed at his expense too as well. So I think that's a good summary of that kind of, yeah. This is good too. The religious is the expression of paternal love, since it contains the ethical, but in a mollified form. And mollified by what? Precisely by what gives the tragic its leniency, continuity. So, oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. I could do this for hours, guys. Don't test me. I might. Okay. So the religious expression of the religious is the expression of paternal love. God, okay. Let's break that down. Let's break it down. Because I think a lot of the sentences, like I said, very run-on, very conjuncture, it's a lot, right? But it's actually so good. It's actually so good. Since it contains the ethical, but in a mollified form. Okay, so paternal meaning the father, right? The creator. If we're thinking in a biblical sense, right? Because it is the ethical, the or, if you will, the opposing opinion of this person. Precisely by what gives the tragedy its leniency, continuity. With faith and hope and words like that associated to religion and God, it's typically pretty, I guess maybe unspoken, but understood that continuity or continuousness, what is the word I'm trying to find here? I wish I had a thesaurus. Oh my God. Continuity. Like everlasting, you know what I mean? Omnipresent almost, that everywhere all at once, all at the same time, continuously, always kind of thought process is what he's explaining about that. But this is a religious consolation, and he who thinks to attain it in some other way, for instance by aesthetic volatilization, has this consolation in vain and doesn't really possess it. In a sense, then, it is a very proper tactic of the age to hold the individual responsible for everything. But the unfortunate thing is that the age does not do it deeply and inwardly enough, and hence its vacillation. Okay. A lot to take in here. So basically what he's continuing his thought from before, right? Of that, yes, you can be aesthetic, you can be the either, and still possess religious practices, preferences, but it's not on the level of almost kind of like he's saying, feeling the consequence, the weight of the sin, because technically the sin doesn't apply. Technically there is no omnipresent connection, no consistency, no currency, no communication between something higher. So it's unright for all of these religious people to blame someone like him and somebody who's purely aesthetical, because some of us might do religious things, we're kind of like you, but really it's a roundabout thought in the way of yes, people like the aesthetic and the either are continuously in their eyes ridiculed and disregarded by those of the ethical. However, if you're looking at it from the ethical stand, it just it goes both ways, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't really know how to explain it. It's just makes you think. Okay. Sorrow always contains something more substantial than pain. Pain always indicates a reflection on suffering, which sorrow does not know. It is very interesting from a psychological standpoint to watch a child when it sees an older person suffer. The child hasn't sufficient reflection to feel the pain, and yet its sorrow is infinitely deep. In ancient tragedy, the sorrow is deeper, and the corresponding consciousness too. The sorrow is deeper. So, the thought of the suffering is more of a painful experience than the suffering actually itself. The perception of the pain is harder to go through than the pain itself, essentially, is what he's saying here. And it's just so fucking good. It's so good. I'm just also like, I hope, like, I'm pulling here, so like, I'm not reading. I wish I could just sit here and read the full thing. That'd be everything. But the sorrow of great tragedy is deeper because the guilt has the ambiguity of the aesthetic. This is part of the confusion evident in so many ways in our age. We look for a thing where we ought not to look for it, and worse, we find it where we ought not to find it. We want to be edified in the theater, to be influenced aesthetically in church, to be converted by novels, to enjoy books of devotion. We want philosophy in the pulpit and the preacher in the professor chair. Let that sink in. That is so good. That's actually so fucking good. All of our morals are corrupt. We're all a little bit screwed up, and we're all misplacing these ideas based on our conceptions of people's morals and values. Fuck. God, he's so good. See, but he reels you in. He reels you in with both. It's like you could never, you almost could never tell that he was an ethical, right, the or person, except for the fact that it absolutely makes sense when you read his version of the aesthetic, because though the aesthetic has all of these beautiful and perfect descriptions and symbols and forms of media to describe himself and what he's feeling, he's also a creature of depression and self-loathing and self-hatred, and just deep darkness, you know, which, like, Kierkegaard himself, like, was a very depressed ass bitch. Like, he was a very sad person, and I think that's why I'm kind of drawn to him. Like, I love the emo little philosophers, you know. It's giving MCR. If you like MCR, you probably like Kierkegaard. I don't know. Also, on a side note, guys, I did the biggest troll tonight. I did the biggest troll tonight, and it is so silly because they're gonna get onto my YouTube whenever the fuck I post this, and they're gonna be like, the fuck is that bitch doing making a video on philosophy? Who were they with? Where were they at? What were they doing? You'll never know. When you know, you know. Let's talk about something else. He literally, he beats a dead horse with this one. We keep talking about Greek tragedies. Oh my god, you guys, I'm so fucking annoying. Oh my god. Oh, this is good though. Okay. Because listening to how the aesthetic, right, how they talk about, or how Kierkegaard perceives they treat and talk about women specifically is very interesting to me. Okay, this is talking about, what is this referencing? Like, what's the story? Oh, hell no. Also, this is, can you read this? Hang on, I just need to stop. I can't read that shit. Okay. Here straight away, I am given my definition of the modern the modern idea of the tragic. For anxiety is a reflection, and in this, it differs essentially from sorrow. Oh, this is so good. Anxiety is the organ through which the subject approaches sorrow and assimilates it. Anxiety is the energy of movement by which sorrow burrows its way to the heart. My man, oh my God, you're reading my mind. We're locked in. Like, we're locked in. Are you guys understanding? Is this even making sense? I feel like I'm just sitting here, like, reading literally hour-long video. Just my favorite fucking quotes. As a passionate erotic glance desires its object, anxiety looks at sorrow in order to desire it. So, like, again, we're referencing, like, the thought of, because anxiety is usually about, like, something that hasn't happened, or fear, you know, the underlying, just fear of unknown, right? Anxiety looks at sorrow in order to desire it. So the thought of, the fear of the pain, the fear of the fear is worse than the fear itself, or worse than the experience itself, worse than the pain itself. Again, you are saying, talking about Hamlet. I have chaperone stuck in my head. You know, no. Trying to get to a different place. This one is from Shadowgraphs 4. Oh God, he always puts the most emo ass poems. Always puts the most emo ass poems in the beginning. Love may always breach its oath. Love spells in this cave does lull the drunken startled soul into forgetting it's pledged its troth. Yesterday I loved, today I suffer, tomorrow I die. Yet fain would think today and tomorrow of yesterday. That's the type of shit I be posting on and stuff. Literally. Anyways, Shadowgraphs. We may take it that the upshot unanimously accepted by all aestheticians is that the difference lies in the fact that the art belongs in the category of space and poetry and that of time, and that art represents response, poetry, movement. If we later on. Okay. This is like me to my kids, like in 20 years. I'm like, bedtime story. If we apply the distinction not propounded here, but only loosely acknowledged to the relation between sorrow and joy, it is easy to see that joy is far easier to represent in art than sorrow. There comes a point, okay, I skipped a little here, but there comes a point at which the essential thing is to posit an opposition between inner and outer, which makes its representation impossible for art. Right. So sorrow, he's explaining, is like something that can't be truly physically or verbally expressed. It's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's like when he starts talking about Mozart, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, it's not something you can put words to, right? As the sick person throws himself from one side to the other in pain, so does reflective sorrow toss about, looking for its object in its expression. When sorrow finds response, then it is... I can't fucking read. When sorrow finds response, then its interior also gradually works its way outwards, becomes visible in the exterior, and so becomes the object of representation for art. Hang with me here. Hang with me here. So when we're talking about art, poetry, writing, painting, drawing, whatever, he's referencing the fact that it is a depiction of an emotion, which is an incredibly difficult task to achieve. However, he is saying that depicting joy and happiness is a much more... Why is my camera crooked? How long has it been like that? Is a much easier... Fuck, I look bad. Oh no. Dropping my camera. Guys. Work. Yeah, joy is easy to represent than sorrow. That's really all I'm saying. That a deception really is very often hard to ascertain, and yet everything depends on this. As long as it remains disputable, sorrow will find no rest, but must continue wandering back and forth in reflection. Moreover, when this deception touches not something external, but a person's whole inner life and the innermost corner of his life, then the probability of reflective sorrows persisting becomes greater and greater. Reflective sorrow cannot, therefore, be the object of representation in art, partly because it never subsists, but is always in the process of becoming, partly because it is unconcerned with and indifferent to the external, the visible. Right. So, in order to become the artist behind the art, the poet behind the poetry, he's essentially saying sorrow is a necessary part of that equation, yet it can never be truly expressed, if that makes sense. Okay. Oh, this is kind of good here. We're getting into it. And it is true that sorrow steals through the world so very secretively that only someone with sympathy for it succeeds in getting a whiff of it. We pass one another in the street. That one person looks like another, and the other just like anyone else. And only the experienced observer suspects that, in the head, there lives a lodger who has nothing to do with the world, but lives out his lonely life confined to quiet domesticity. So the outer is the object of our observation, but not our interest. And then he says, so the outer does indeed have significance for us, yet not as an expression of the inner, but like a telegram telling of something hidden deep within. Oh my fucking God. I can't break that down. I can't break that down. It's broke down enough. It's at its rawest form. That is so fucking good. Let's skip ahead a little, shall we? Getting into it. We're getting into it. We're getting into it. We're getting into it. This is talking about. Alright. Now, this is talking about unhappy love, is what he quantifies this as, and we'll get into it. The nature of unhappy love can be such that suicide is to be considered aesthetically correct. But in that case, it must not be based on deception, for then a suicide loses all nobility and implies an admission which pride must refuse to make. On the other hand, if it is indeed death of her, this amounts to his having murdered her. Right? So, like, that's really emo. Like, he's literally saying, he's like, so if she because of him, it's like he killed her. Word? Like, that's crazy. I'm like, it takes a crazy bitch. It's giving, like, Would They See Me in the Hospital? It's giving that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? It's giving, like, oh my God, but, like, if something happened, would they, like, show up as they called them? Like, I'm like, oh my God, Kierkegaard, calm down. This causes those around her embarrassment. They feel it won't do to keep on repeating assurance that she is dying when she continues to live. This is when, me just reading, this is when he gets into talking about this girl he's trying to seduce. For you can guess what? Obviously, a young girl is not a jurist, but it by no means follows that she cannot pass judgment. And yet this girl's verdict will always be such that, while at first glance looking at... Oh my God, I'm so dyslexic, y'all. Hang on. Fuck. Did I just, like, mix all those words around? Okay. Obviously, a young girl is not a jurist, but it by no means follows that she cannot pass judgment. And yet this girl's verdict will always be such that while at first glance looking like a verdict, it contains something else that shows no verdict, and which also shows that the next moment a quiet opposition verdict can be given. Yes, it's true, he said. I had no idea I could be so happy. or that there was such a wealth of joy as he taught me. But nor did I have any idea I could become as unhappy as I am now. And this too he has taught me. Yeah. Yeah, this is the story about a girl who, herself, because of her man, to get attention. So, we're gonna skip ahead a little bit. Talking about him being a hoe. We're gonna skip ahead to the unhappiest one, 5. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Alright. Let's get sad again. For the unhappiest person. Okay. Yeah. For the unhappy person is he who has his ideal, the content of his life, the fullness of his conscience, his real nature in some way or other outside himself. The unhappy man is always absent from himself, never present to himself. But one can be absent, obviously, either in the past or in the future. This adequately circumscribes the entire territory of the unhappy conscience. He's going to dig into it. He said, but science also teaches us that there is a perfect, what the fuck is that word? I'm being real, I don't know. Perfect tense in which there is no present, as well as the future perfect tense with the same characteristics. These are the hoping and remembering individuals. I don't know why I highlighted that. I think I just wanted to be smart. However, one cannot strictly call an individual unhappy who is present in hope or in memory, being delulu. For what one must note here is that he is still present to oneself in one of these. Right, in his feelings. Okay, this is good. This is good. Memory is a pre-amenity, the real element of unhappy, as it is natural seeing the past has a remarkable characteristic that is gone, that the future is yet to come. And one can therefore say, in a sense, that the future is nearer than the present than is the past. So, again, going back to the anxiety and the expectation, the perception, the thought process that goes into things before they're lived or experienced. Living in the lingering, okay? Not in the past, but of the future. Living in that constant state of up in the air, I guess. The past, for the remembering individual to be present in it, must have had reality for him. But whenever the hoping individual would have a future which can have no reality for him, or the remembering individual remember a past which has no reality for him, then we have the genuinely unhappy individuals. Okay. So when you're being totally delulu about like a sitch where, you know, you're totally being delulu, you're gonna be miserable. But also you're gonna be miserable when you remember things only from your own perspective and only see things one-sided and never really open yourself up to other people's interpretations. Because you're gonna be playing the same tune over and over and over until you go insane, being like, something's wrong here and I don't know what it is. Oh, it's your own actions, right? Essentially what we're getting, blah, 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 blah. I really like these 2 pages. Again. Unhappy individuals who never hope have the same pain as the individuals who remember. Fuck, if that ain't real right there. The people who hope never have the same pain as those who remember, those who are trapped by the past, right? Hoping individuals always have more gratifying disappointment. So their pain and suffering is meant for something. So we're talking again about the ethical, the or, right? The religious, the spiritual. Those people, suffering has a purpose, pain has a purpose and a reward. If we're speaking about heaven, yeah, we can put it in the context of heaven. The unhappiest ones will always therefore be found among the unhappy remembers, right? So again, that warped perception, or just choosing to dwell and remember things that are unpleasant and unserving to us in our present. Oh, this is good. The combination can be this: that what prevents him from being present in hope is memory, and what prevents him from being present in memory is hope. This is what it amounts to. On one hand, he constantly hopes for something he should be remembering. His hope is consistently disappointed, but on its being disappointed, he discovers that the reason is not that the goal has been moved further on, but that he has gone past it, that it has already been experienced, or is supposed to have been, and thus passed over onto memory. On the other hand, he constantly remembers something that he should be hoping for, right? So no whether you're surrounding yourself with the past or delusions about the future, you're taking yourself out of the present and lacking appreciation for the critical moments you're living right now. Like, you can't take care of yourself and experience life if you have no concept of what's happening to you currently. You know what I'm saying? Consequently, he hopes for lies behind him, and what he remembers lies before him. Yeah. This is good too. I love that this is just me breaking down quotes. I'm just like, I'm living for it 47 minutes in. His misfortune is that he has come to the world too soon, and is therefore constantly arriving too late. He is forever quite close to the goal, and the same moment at a distance from it. He now discovers what it is that makes him unhappy, because he now has it, or because he is this way, is precisely what a few years ago would have made him happy if he had had it then, whereas then he was unhappy because he did not have it. You know, like, say you really want to get into a relationship and you're so pissed you're single and you're sad and you're miserable and you sit there and you complain about it all the time, right? Well, like 2 years down the line, you're complaining about that you settled and you're dating the worst person in the world and they treat you terribly and you're miserable. Both sides of the same coin, essentially, if that makes sense. Left to himself, he stands in the wide world alone. Again, this undertone of self-isolation, self-loathing, hatred, depression, like just not fitting into the generic mold, which is the ethical. You know, I've actually had this debate with someone before, and they are a very aesthetic person, and I think they were just frustrated because I knew more than them in this instance. But yeah, he didn't take it well. I was like, well, I'm just telling you from an ethical perspective that you're aesthetic with perhaps ethical tendencies, and I don't know. He got really mad. I don't know. Don't try and talk to men about philosophy. They either start crying and like, either to them you're giving like their mom or their high school bully, and then they start treating you as such, or they just think they're better than you, and that's really annoying. Like, why would a man be there? The fuck? This is really going on. It's going on and on. It's just like he gets really emo with it. Okay. Okay, crop rotation. An attempt at a theory of a social prudence is really, 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 really good. Okay. People of experience maintain that it is very sensible to start from principle. I grant them that and start with the principle that all men are boring. Word. You don't know the half. This shit get real. Right? The principle possesses to the highest degree that power of repulsion one always requires of any negative that genuinely provides the principle of motion. Let me go back here. It's in the back, this reference. Proportion. It's literally one. Kierkegaard frequently lampoons the way in which the negative or the antithesis in the Hegelian dialect is made to generate on its own the movement leading to the resolution of opposition and higher unity. If you're confused on what that means, I don't really know how to explain it to you, TBH. He writes elsewhere of the, oh God, it's so hard to say this word, in, okay, basically we don't even need to go over it. But yeah, Kierkegaard hates that shit. So he's always clowning it. Not merely in its repellent, but it's infinitely foreboding, and the person with this principle behind him must necessarily have an infinite moment to make discoveries with. Strange that boredom, so still and static, should have so much power to set things in motion. The effect that boredom excesses is altogether magical, except that it is not one of the attractions, but repulsion. How ruinous boredom is to everyone also recognizes in relation to children. And he goes on to say, so in choosing a nursemaid, one pays attention not just to her sobriety, faithfulness, and decency, one also takes into consideration her aesthetically, her ability to amuse the children. Right, the ability to entertain, the ability to perform. Again, another reference to being super theatrical. Essentially, your whole life is just one big play, and you're just the character behind this. You know what? It's he has this very like that. He has this really interesting way of describing how an aesthetic person views the world through their lens. And I think truly only the other side, like the ethical, could describe it. And I truly think only the aesthetic could describe the ethical. I think that's the beauty of it, because the ethical is the unknown. The aesthetic is the fear of the known. If that makes sense in really layman's terms, I guess. Yeah. I probably sound so fucking stupid. Oh my fucking God. This is what I'm doing on a Friday night. Like, fuck. Okay. Again, we're getting to like sin and that kind of concept of how it applies to the aesthetic. So far from the idleness being the root of evil, rather it is the true good. The root of evil is boredom, and that is what must be kept at bay. He goes on to say, there is a kind of restlessness activity that keeps a person out of the world of the spirit and puts him in a class with the animals, which from instinct must always be on the go. He says later, yet in so far as people think it is characteristic of man to work, idleness and industry are properly opposed to each other. My own assumption is that it is characteristic of man to amuse himself, but my opposites are therefore no less correct. Boredom is demonic pantheism. If we remain in it, such becomes evil. Yeah, it's just like being bored is like the root cause of why I'm like a whore and essentially like a terrible person. Is like I don't have God to fill up my time. Like I don't have church to go to on Sunday to keep me accountable. Like I'm the writer of my own story, so why not shake things up a little? Like why would I let myself not be entertained and entertaining? Yeah. Change is what all who are bored cry out for. Kind of ate down with that one. Right? Because it's not necessarily saying you're calling in a positive or a negative, a certain experience, a person, whatever. Just that word change, like, carries so much weight, right? Right. Fuck. Whatever. Ugh. I'm so gagged. I just got the most random memory. I'm actually shook. It was so vivid. I'm like, no. Okay. That was so vivid. I don't know if it's what I said or what. Oh my God, I have chills. Weird. Okay. I need to check something real quick. I need to check. I just have a feeling. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. Honestly, I wanted to make a whole different video. I did, but I'm not going to, because I'm not gonna give, honestly, myself the satisfaction of doing that, because, yeah, I'm not ever gonna come on here and talk about anybody ever again. I'm never gonna be sad over anybody again. I'm never dating anyone ever again. So, yeah, but I'm in a different outfit because it's a different day. I'm in my Budweiser shirt. So Lana coded, but let's continue, shall we? I really wanted to skip to the seducer's diary portion of the either technically or aesthetic version, the version of letters. This one is really, really, really good. It might be my favorite besides the aesthetic validity of marriage in this whole book. Now, the seducer's diary is where Kierkegaard basically takes this point of view of this seducer, right? This aesthetic man who continuously just tries to take girls, like that's just his thing, right? Is capturing that innocence of the first love, as he calls it. So I figured we skip ahead here and then we can like round it off by talking about a little bit of the end or whatever. Oh. Oh my God, this reminds me of damn, I didn't know this was in here. Yeah. My kids at the shelter. I know the energy has shifted. I know, I think this is going to make me feel better to talk about something I actually like and continuously shift my focus only into things of that nature, because fuck the rest of y'all. Fuck y'all. I've been sleeping on my couch because when I get too upset, I can't sleep in bed. I don't know. Okay, so he's describing himself or whatever. He's talking about himself in the third person, but this is, I guess kind of just like describing him and describing like the writings or whatever. And basically the point of view of this chapter of the book is like Kierkegaard, right, finds this diary in an antique chest that he got at an estate sale, whatever. And he's like, so strange, like I found these composition of letters from this, the aesthetic person towards the ethical. Sorry about the interruption. Phone's blowing up. Okay. It was neither more nor less than a diary painstakingly kept, and just as I did not think, from what I knew of him before, that his life was in such great need of commentary, so I do not deny, after the insight I had now gained, that the title had been chosen with much taste and understanding, with true aesthetic objective mastery of himself and the situation, called The Seducer's Diary. He says later on in the passage, his life has been an attempt to realize the task of living poetically. With a keenly developed sense for what is interesting in life, he had known how to find it, and having found it, he had constantly reproduced the experience in a semi-poetic way. Right? So similar to addiction, right? Usually it's to a material substance, whether it's like alcohol, drugs, shopping, gambling, sex, whatever, right? So we're breaking it down into the physical and aesthetic pleasures of life, whatever. The poetic was the extra he himself brought with him. This extra was the poetic element he enjoyed in the poetic situation provided by reality. This element he took back in again and in the form of poetic reflection. So, and then later on he said, in the first case, he has savored the aesthetic element personally. In the second, he savored his own person aesthetically. So, this extra was the poetic element he enjoyed in the poetic situation provided by reality, i.e. the woman or the girl or the music, the theater, the art, right? And then the element he took back in again in the form, and so this element he took back in again in the form of poetic reflection, talking about his perceptions and the way, really he bases his actions and justifies his actions in the course of his life. He continues by saying the poetic is thus something he is constantly possessed by virtue of the ambiguity in which his life has passed. Right? So this is him basically describing like him finding this diary and his reaction to it, right? Before he starts getting into it. He did not belong to reality, yet had much to do with it. I think that's just such a powerful line, right? Because again, Kierkegaard is this extremely religious, ethical, moral person. And so he's just like such a genius, like such a G, honestly, for like being able to a T, describe not only his own perception of what the aesthetic man is, but the feelings, that total aesthetic nature of verbiage and exclamation, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to even put into words because it's aesthetic, right? You know what I mean? But like I said, he did not belong to reality and yet had much to do with it. He's not, the aesthetic man is not confined to the box of religion, right? Like, he's not confined to these the weight of the sins, you know, the weight of his own sins, because he makes his own conception of what sin is, really, right? Let me just start that over. He says later in the paragraph, reality was not too much for him. He was not too weak to bear its burden. No, he was too strong, but this strength was a sickness. As soon as reality lost its power to incite, he was disarmed. That is where evil lay in him. There's a lot to unpack in that. I do want to read just the last sentence too. He was conscious of this even at the moment of incitement, and it was in his consciousness of the evil way, of this evil. Oh my God, I can't read. He was conscious of this even at the moment of incitement, and it was in his consciousness of this evil lay. Okay, so as much as he is not constricted and restricted in his actions and his experience, he is still a part of and participating in the sin if you're looking at it from an ethical standpoint. Okay, and then he starts to talk about like the victims of these seducers, right? So the women that get caught in their spinster wheel of lies. We know a few of those. He goes on to say, but however, I wonder, do things look in his own head? Just as he has led others astray, so in my view, he ends by going astray himself. It is not in external respects that he has led others astray, but in ways that affected them inwardly, right? So causing that breakdown, that depression, that cycle of loathing and destruction in another because of your own sense of inner turmoil, right? Your inability to see and conceptualize right and wrong. A person who goes astray inwardly has less room for maneuver. He soon finds he is going round in a circle from which he cannot escape. Right. I'll say that one again. A person who goes astray inwardly has less room for maneuver. He soon finds he is going round in a circle from which he cannot escape. For what is the pain even of remorse compared with this conscious madness? His punishment has a purely aesthetic character, for even to talk of his conscious awakening is to apply too ethical an expression to him. Right, so like he's not even awake into these concepts into himself. So in a way, it's almost like he's in this childlike state. Again, we're going back to that symbolism, which Kierkegaard masters so well. I think we were talking about it in the beginning, of how the child perceives the pain of someone who is dying of old age worse than the person is feeling it. That the idea of suffering is more painful than the suffering itself. That the fear of the unknown is worse than the actual unknown itself, right? That is an aesthetic thought point. Yeah. Let's see, and this is just, basically these letters are going back and forth between Johannes and then his shorty, Cordelia. Yeah, you know what I mean? So then here we get into the letters, right? But right before we do, I do like this line. Nothing, after all, is so pervaded by seduction and damnation as a secret. Right? Yeah, let's see if I want to get into it. Basically, he's really fucking weird in this. He makes the seducer weird as fuck. I'll give you a brief outline. So he sees this girl walking down the street one day with her friends, living life, having fun, and as men and women that are aesthetic and weird do, they just plot and pry and find out ways that they can snatch that joy and rip it out of you and make you a shell of a human being. And that's essentially what he does, right? So he literally follows her around, and starts courting one of her friends just so he can get close to her. Drops the friend, right? Breaks off the engagement, because back then, like, you could get engaged like a million fucking times. If you're a man. So he breaks off the engagement, right? He starts frequenting the store that she would, like, play piano at and, like, occasionally work at. And then he gets in good with her aunt. So essentially, he starts going over to visit the aunt. She's there. She's courting someone. Uh-oh. So this kind of takes a little bit of the magic away for him, right? Once he finds out that somebody else is experiencing and perceiving her in a way in which he would like to for himself. That's what he derives the pleasure from, is not from other people experiencing it, but purely his own experience and sensation of pleasure, right? So he starts going over to visit the aunt like every week or so. And then he starts to get in good with the man she is courting. Okay? So he pulls a 2-man on her. And he ends up being like hyping him up to propose, hyping him up to propose. Whole time he's plotting on this man and this girl. And the aunt. And the aunt. Because you know what he does? He talks to the aunt about proposing to her before dude can. Convinces him, don't talk to the aunt. So then he's kind of mad, but he was like, oh, like, I can't be too mad. For some reason, he still sticks around, right? So at this point, they're engaged. And it's super awkward. But he's, like, starting to get a little bored. And essentially, they go through this whole thing. It's just because he has it. It's simply because he has it now. I want to go to the end. I will say this was the most grueling chapter or part of the book for me to get through, just because like Kierkegaard does a phenomenal job writing him as the most ridiculous and annoying person to read ever. Like, let me give you an example. Anyone unable to so encompass a girl that she loses sight of everything he doesn't want her to see, so to poeticize his way into the girl that it is from her that everything issues, just as he himself would wish it, it is always and will always be a burglar. I am an aesthetic and eroticist who grasps the nature and meaning of love, who believes in love and knows it from the ground up. Right? And then he says, all this I know. I also know that the highest form of enjoyment conceivable is to be loved. Loved more than everything in the world. To poeticize oneself into a girl is an art. To poeticize oneself out of her is a masterpiece. Yet the latter depends essentially on the former. The cycle of death and rebirth. The rush of the excitement in the fall. Starting it all over again with someone new. I think a lot of you on dating apps could learn a lot from sitting down and reading a book. But I don't think you... Yeah. Let me find you something from like towards the end here. From when he's starting to speak about how he is not vibing with it. But I mean, like, again, he's a really good, like, let me just give you another passage. Her embrace is comprehensive as the cloud enfolding the transfigured one. Detached as a breeze, soft as the fondling of a flower, she kisses me unspecifically as the sky kisses the sea, gently and quietly, as the dew kisses a flower, solemnly as the sea kisses the image of the moon. I would call her passion at this moment a naive passion. He says later down, she has no other means for this purpose than the erotic itself, except that this will now appear on quite a different scale. It then becomes a weapon in her hand she wields against me. She fights for her own sake because she knows I possess the erotic. She fights for her own sake as so to overcome me. What I taught her to suspect by arousing her, my coldness now teaches her to understand, but in such a way that she thinks it is herself who discovers it. In me she seeks for freedom and finds it. The better, the more firmly I encompass her. Right. I think this really starts to sum it up, because again, he's like doing the hot and cold. They've been doing this forever, y'all. They've been doing this forever. This is just proof of it. What I offer her is what I consider the best nourishment. Mythology and fairy tales. I'm gonna read that one again. I'm gonna read that one again to you. What I offer her is what I consider the best nourishment. mythology and fairy tales. She is nevertheless free in this as in everything. There is nothing that I have not learned from her herself. If it isn't there to begin with, I put it there. Every encounter, every interaction, every feeling she thinks she has is all in his mind prompted and created because he is this all-controlling, masterful puppeteer, not the omnipresent, godlike figure that I think a lot of people would expect others to perceive an aesthetic man as, right? The seducer, right? But more so this, again, like puppeteer, director, playwright, in control of only his circle, his characters in his life, essentially, because none of these characters have motion unless it's in relation to him. None of these people, this Cordelia, right? Or her aunt, or the man who was courting her, or her friend that he was engaged to before, or the shopkeep where he frequented so that he could have encounters with her when this whole thing started. You know what I mean? None of these characters have life or motion or emotion unless it's related to or directly in an encounter with him, perceived by him. That's what I'm trying to say. So, again, yeah, just a food for thought. I'm psychotic. I literally have written all over these pages. I'm just like, literally, here he wasn't looking for an answer, but more so confirmation, projection, semicolon, self-deprecation, attempting to gain an answer, trying to ask questions. I can't make this up. Oh God, I thought I ate. And this can explain why, when God created Eve, he let a deep sleep fall upon Adam, for a woman is a man's dream. There is also another way in which the story teaches that woman is being for another. For it is said that Jehovah took a rib from the man's side. He had taken something, say, from the man's brain. Woman had no doubt remained a being for another. The idea, however, would not have been to make her a fragment of the brain, but something quite different. She became flesh and blood. But for that very reason, she falls under the description nature, which is essentially being for another. It is at the touch of love that she first awakens. Before that, she is a dream. And yet we can distinguish two stages in that dream existence. The first is when love dreams about her, and the second when she dreams about love. Yeah. This is my Cliff's note at the bottom in pink pen. Exploring themes of motherhood as it presents itself aesthetically to the idea of for another. Again, that concept of a woman being created for another. That aesthetic idea that kind of blends somewhat seamlessly into the ethical. Let's see here. For Greece, one did not treat these things lightly and irresponsibly, yet everyone knows that Venus bears a nickname as a result of this contest, and that all admire the image of Venus which has immortalized her. A married woman has two periods in her life when she is interesting. Her earliest youth, and then again long after, when she becomes a great deal older. But she has also, this must not be denied her, a moment when she is even more charming than a young girl and inspires even more respect. But it is a rare moment in life which need not be seen in life itself, and perhaps never so. I imagine her then, healthy, blooming, luxuriantly developed, and she holds a child in her arms on whom all her attentions in tune is turned, in whose completion she is lost. It is a picture one might call the most charming human life has to offer. It is a natural myth, which may therefore only be seen in art, not in reality. Nor must there be any additional figures in this picture, no setting, for that would only disturb. If one has resort to our churches, one has frequent opportunity to see a mother approaching with a child in arms. So then he kind of gets into the symbolism of that. Conceived as a picture for the imagined, it is the most charming thing of all. I am not without courage and daring, nor recklessness enough to venture an assault. But if I saw such an image in reality, I would be defenseless. So again, it's the only perfect representation of a woman, right, would be the true essence of her being for another being, right? So for dash another, if you guys need that visual, because I guess I can put it on the screen, for another being, how he's writing it, because the child depends on her life. And you can take that as the depiction of Jesus and Mary. That's not the one I'm thinking of, though. It actually goes way far back, the depiction of mother and infant child, and I'm trying to think of what that's called. I can't remember what it's called, but so again, that's the only perfect image of a woman, right? But again, a man is needed in creating that child, if we're looking at it in that sense. So but it's this unattainable, right? This mythical, this theological idea of a woman being for another. So completely unattainable. How he starts to end the seducer's diary, right? Takes her virginity, cuts off the engagement, and this is what he has to say. And keep in mind at this point you're almost 400 pages into this book and you're just you know what I mean? So it's whatever. Her development was my handiwork. I shall soon enjoy my reward. How much have I gathered into this one moment which is now at hand? Death and damnation if I should fail. The next day or whatever, he's for in a man, innocence is a negative factor, while for a woman, it is her whole worth. Now, all resistance is impossible, and only when it is there, it is beautiful to love. Once it is gone, love is only weakness and habit. Cheyenne, why'd you say take care? Oh. I was why did Cheyenne just text me that? What the hell? Sometimes I forget I send shit to group chats, and then Cheyenne and Kevin will just quote what I sent, and then I'm okay, take care. I was she's mad at me. She's not. Oh god. Guys, I hate my life, it's fine. Anyways, this is the last paragraph, the last quote from the Seducer's Diary and from the aesthetic portion of the book. And I just think it's really important. It really sums it up. Nevertheless, it would be worthwhile knowing whether one couldn't poeticize oneself out of a girl. Leave her. Whether one couldn't make her so proud that she imagined it was she who wearied of the relationship. It could become a quite interesting epilogue. which in its own right might be of a psychological interest, and besides that, enrich one with many erotic observations. Right. And then we move into the aesthetic validity of marriage, which again is probably my second favorite in the book. And I love how he starts it. He says, "My friend!" Exclamation point. My friend. Bro, calm down. And so, right, then we get into his homie, who is more Kierkegaard coded, right? The ethical and the moral version. So this is when he starts to get into, he basically starts it like, oh my God, I'm so appalled with you, but also like sympathizing and having that empathetical standpoint to start with, right? So like, it is impossible really to be angry with you. The evil in your case is in the medieval conception, has a certain admixture of good nature and the childlike, like we talked about earlier. As for marriage, you have always remained simply an observer. There is something treacherous in wanting only to observe. Fuck. There is something treacherous in only wanting to observe. If you know. That's crazy. God, it's bar for bar for bar for bar in this whole book. You have to read it. You have to read it, guys. It's literally so fucking good. Yeah, and then he's just like, why are you always like taking these girls' virginities? Oh yeah. His main objective theme for the responsive essay. Please shut the fuck up. But yeah, here's the thing, right? There are two things in particular I must regard as my task: to show the aesthetic significance of marriage and to show how the aesthetic element can be sustained in the face of life's manifold obstacles. Right? Oh yeah, this is talking about like divine intervention, karma, rejection of your path in life type shit. And do you not see, if you really put on your traveling boots and journeyed out into the world, wasting your time and energy, you would miss the chance of all other activity, which may continue to torment you again later on. So like, again, this ethical has the standpoint of, though you don't believe in it, it doesn't mean it can't consume and impact your life, right? So like, though you don't believe in sin or hell or the devil or whatever your conception of bad or evil is, right? You still have responses, even as the own playwright. Your characters still are capable of response, if that makes sense. Like, things are still capable of being changed. Karma's wheel can still turn, essentially, right? And he goes on to say, certainly you should take care not to call that feeling egoism. It is your usual rebellious lack of shame. Everything established by divine or human law you despise, and to free yourself from it, you grasp hold of the accidental, as in the case of a poor woman unknown to you. Fuck. And as for your sympathy, perhaps it was pure for your experiments. And then I wrote, God is not self-serving. Right? Right, so again, there's that distinction between the ethical and the aesthetical. The aesthetic rules himself and those around him, or at least that's how he perceives it to be, whereas the ethical is the vessel, is the servant, is the undoubting faithful follower towards that presence, that God, right? Who serves God's will, others' will, whatever. No one convinced of something can turn himself and everything else upside down at will in this manner. I am warning you, therefore, not about the world, but about yourself, and I am warning the world about you. Powerful. Yeah, like literally, like you just said, like, and not only am I, like, he really wants to cause that, like, that self-reflection, right? That inward, that going inward, that the ethical and the moral does, that the or is that inward reflection towards something higher than self. But to the aesthetic, there is nothing higher than the self. The self is the highest form of recognition, is the wants, the desires, the needs of that person versus the routine and the structure and the principles of the order, if that makes sense. What is true in these works, the proper aesthetic element, is the fact that love is put to work, that this feeling is represented as fighting its way through an opposite. What is false in them is that the struggle, the dialect, is entirely external, and that love comes out of the struggle as abstract as it entered into it. Once there is a proper appreciation of love's own dialect, of its own pathological struggle, of its relation to the ethical, to religion, there will in truth be no need of guarded fathers, maidens, bowers, or enchanted princesses and ogres and monsters to give love enough to do. Again, he's going into like that fairy tale, mythological, tragic representation of romance. The immediacy of romantic love is revealed by its dependency on natural necessity, on the physical, on the understandable. What is able to be manipulated, I guess is a better way to put that. For what distinguishes love from lust is its having the stamp of the eternal. Okay. For the sensual is the insatious. It seeks instant satisfaction, and the more refined it is, the better it knows how to make the moment of pleasure into little eternity. While the true eternity in love, as in truly ethical way of life, is what really first delivers love from out of the sensuous. But to bring about this true eternity, there must be determination of the will, of which more later. Okay. And it isn't only in the moment of sorrow that the heavens must be held open. It is important to have an unobstructed view even in times of joy and the double doors thrown wide. If enjoyment were the main thing in life, I would sit at your feet to learn, for in this you are master. Knowledge is gained through suffering, and Kierkegaard is somebody who is a very, very, very firm believer in that. I think my cliff note that I wrote here was, faith carries you through good and bad and is always present. If enjoyment were the main thing in life, I would sit at your feet to learn, for in this you are master. For the ethical, life isn't about what is just here on earth. It's deeper than just, it's not just about the physical, right? It's about what happens after we pass. And especially with him being such a Christian, it's about heaven, it's about the afterlife. Okay. But within Christianity too, Love had to suffer many a turn of fate before coming to where it could see the profundity, beauty, and truth that lie in marriage. Since, however, the immediately preceding age and to some extent our own have been reflected, it is not such an easy matter to demonstrate it. Insofar as it provided a defect of romantic love that it was not reflective, it might perhaps seem proper to let the true conjunctural love begin with that kind of doubt. And then this is what I, in my opinion, or identified as the main objective of the thesis. The question is whether it can really be a part of marriage to annihilate the possibility of first love through doubt of the possibility of realizing that love. So let's just pause it right there. The question is whether it can really be a part of marriage to annihilate the possibility of first love through the doubt of the possibility of realizing that love. So can you ruin the aesthetic experience through ethical values and morals? Right. And to make the conjunctural love both possible and actual through this annihilation, or whether the immediate, the first love, can be secured against his skepticism by being taken up into higher concentric immediacy, so that the conjunctural love would not need to plow under the beautiful expectations of the first love, but be itself in first love with an admixture of qualities which did not impoverish but enrich it. Right, and so it's really convoluted and messy and confusing, but essentially what he's saying is both can exist, yet it's not possible to be both aesthetical and ethical. An aesthetic man can possess ethical qualities, however he is still aesthetic. An ethical man can possess some aesthetic qualities, however he is still ethical. It's in our treatment of ourselves and others. It is, I guess a better way to say that is, it is in our treatment of ourselves, how we express ourselves and others perceive us. In the religious sphere, love finds again the infinity for which, as reflective love, it sought in vain. And then he goes on to say, but love has in itself precisely the quality of eternity. Whether the love is of the superstitious, romantic, chivalrous kind, or the deeper moral religious love, which is filled with energetic and vital assurance. So essentially he's making the argument that love is on the same level of hope or faith, right? Like whether you are an aesthetic person, you can still possess this quality. You still can experience this feeling. It's something, just human nature, we're all predisposed to, right? It's whether we continue to deepen our love after that, right? That initial first love, whatever, and fight for it, or whether we choose and make that choice to shut it off right then and there. Marriage then is not meant to evoke love. On the contrary, it presupposes it, but presupposes it as something present, not past. Yet marriage has an ethical and religious factor. Being in love has not. For this reason, marriage is based upon resignation. Being in love is not. Not unless we are to assure that everyone makes two moves in their lives. First, the, if I may put it so, pagan move, where being in love belongs. Then the Christian move, which is expressed in marriage. Unless one is to say that such love has to be left by our Christianity, it will have to be shown that love and marriage are compatible. Right, so like we are, though we can govern these laws and powers over people and compromises for things like back then, like land and money and power, right? Like, we have no control over love. We have control over perception, over how we view the world, how we treat others, how we allow others to treat us, how we treat our own life. And so in that, you could make the argument to say that he is leaning more towards the idea that love can grow if you are more morally aligned, right? Like, really breaking it down back, like, in super basic terms, like, real true love has nothing to do with marriage. Like, you could know before you get married. You could not know till 10 years after you get married. It just, again, it depends on that person, right? Are they in control of their own life, or are they allowing something greater to control their life and determine their course and their actions, right? I'm just trying to find something. This is a good one right here. Earthly love begins by loving several, the preliminary anticipations, and ends in loving one. Spiritual love opens itself constantly wider, loves more and more, has its truth in loving all. So marriage is sensual but spiritual at the same time, free and also necessary, absolute in itself and also within itself, pointing beyond itself. Because it has this inner harmony, marriage naturally has its teleology in itself. It is, insofar as it constantly presupposes itself, and in this respect, any question of its why is a misunderstanding. I would stress the beauty in those marriages which have as little why as possible. The less why, the more moral the love is. That is, when one sees what is true in it. For the frivolous, there will, of course, prove to have been little why in retrospect. For the serious person, there will prove, to his joy, to have been a huge why. The less wise, the better. Again, it's just like, I know I keep driving home these same points. I feel like I'm really dumbing it down. Sometimes I wish I knew how to like express myself harder. I have a really hard time with words anymore. I used to be so smart, guys. I used to be able to, words. Let me find a good quote to end this on. Oh my god, this video is gonna be 2 fucking hours. Fuck. Okay. Fuck. Ask yourself and keep on asking until you find the answer. For one can recognize a thing as many times and acknowledge it. One can want a thing many times and attempt it. Yet only the deep inner movement, only the indescribable motions of the heart, only these convince you what you have recognized belongs unto you, that no power can take it from you, for only the truth that edifies is the truth for you. What an ethical way to end it. He's like, you choose, like it's a choice, right? I don't really know what else to say to end this video. This book has helped me significantly. This book changed my life. This book made me want to read more books. Like, this book made me want to write. This book made me it made me look at a lot of things differently. I mean, I think I've always considered myself more of an ethical person with perhaps aesthetic tendencies. I'm kind of at a loss for words. I don't really know. I started this book at a really, 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 really pivotal moment in my life when I had no idea. And finishing it was just like the most cathartic and ridiculous experience. I mean, you really just have to read Kierkegaard to get it. And I know it's a very overwhelming and long and kind of grueling read, but incredibly worth it in my opinion. Incredibly worth it. So I've been sitting here for an hour. This is crazy. This is the end of the video. I'm not going to draw it out with a super long outro. I have nothing else to add. Thanks for watching. Oh God, all I do is embarrass myself on the internet and get hate watched. It's fine. All right, bye.